All right, so the purpose of this activity, which we'll be working on today and Tuesday, okay, is to kind of look at what factors affect climate in Canada the most. Okay, we went over the factors that affected climate on Tuesday. Okay, that would have been things like latitude, altitude, proximity to mountain barriers, distribution of land and sea, okay, high pressure, low pressure, okay, prevailing winds, all of that stuff. Those are all factors that affect climate. Okay, what we want to look at today is we have a list of cities and we have their climatograms. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the climatograms, and then we're going to be looking at where these cities are and seeing if cities that have similar climatograms also have similar factors affecting their climate. All right, that's what we want to be looking for today, is to try and tie those two things together. All right. So the problem we're investigating is what factors affect the climate of an area. Okay, in our hypothesis, okay, in the if part, we want to talk about what factors we think are most important in Canada in general. Okay, so that's what our if part is. If the following factors, blah, 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 affect climate in Canada, okay, the and part needs to talk about, the experiment that we're doing. And the experiment that we're doing is really, okay, just we're comparing some climatograms in kind of geographic locations. So okay, so the and part is we're comparing cities. Okay, and their climatograms. Okay, then the then part needs to talk about what patterns you're going to see. Okay, and by patterns you're going to see, I mean you need to predict, okay, what cities are going to have similar climates. Okay, so we're looking at, you know, like you could say something general, and you can use this in there because I'm giving it to you as an example, but cities on the eastern coast of Canada will have similar climates because. Okay, something like that. And then you would have to expand a bit on that as well. Okay, you're talking about what patterns you expect to see, right? So you may need to list a few patterns that you think you will see. Okay, so as you can see, there's no design here, right? There's no manipulated variable, there's no responding variable. This isn't an experiment, okay? This is a data analysis activity, right? We're looking at data that's already been gathered, and we're trying to figure out what patterns there are in that data. Okay, does that sort of make sense? Okay, so what you're going to be doing is, okay, you're going to get into groups, okay, like let's say groups of 2 or 3, okay, but let's say no more than 3. I mean, if you want to do this on your own, you can, but it's a lot of work. Okay, it's a lot of work if you're not pairing up with some other people to kind of split it up. Okay, so you're going to use the climate graphs that I have in this activity. Okay, and the first thing you're going to do is look at those climate graphs and determine what cities go together. Okay, so just as a quick review, okay, in a typical climate graph or climatogram, okay, the temperature is represented by the line, okay, which is usually a bell curve, and the precipitation is measured by the bars, okay. It's months along the bottom, okay. Here's what we're looking for. We are looking for cities that have similar shapes to their climatograms, that is, similar climate patterns of precipitation and temperature, all right. So all you're doing for the first part is going through the climate graphs and putting cities together in groups that have similar graphs, right? Realistically, you should have somewhere between 5 and 7 groups of cities, okay? Because I've had people who, like, they're done this thing in like 4 minutes, and they're like, here are my 2 groups. And it's like west and east. Okay, like it's not good enough. Okay, there's a lot more patterns and groups here that we can find, somewhere between 5 and 7 different climate groups. All right, so if I was looking at these graphs, okay, I'm seeing here that, you know, like This is Halifax. Halifax, it goes down to, around -5 or so in the wintertime, gets up as high as about, 18, 19 on average in the summertime. And the precipitation is fairly level with a bit of a dip through the summer, right? When I look at St. John's, Newfoundland, I see a fairly similar pattern. Okay, I see the temperature is about the same. It's, -5 in the winter, about +16 or so in the summertime. And I'm seeing a similar pattern in rainfall and a similar amount. That's the thing you really have to watch when you're looking at these climatograms. When I went out to find this data, I found these climatograms, but they don't all have the same scale. Okay, so it's possible that a place that's really dry could look very much like a place that's really wet, but you have to look at the scale. Okay, I'm looking at these right here and seeing, all right, the maximum amount of rainfall is, about 110 millimeters of rain in a month, and it's about the same here in St. John's, Newfoundland, 110. But if I look at this graph and I don't look at the scale, I might put it in the same group as these because it still has that kind of shape to it. But look at the rainfall. The scale is a lot different. Right? This place gets 3 times as much rain as this. Those aren't going in the same group. Agreed? Okay, so just make sure you look at the scale here because scale is important. Temperature is generally on the left, okay, and precipitation is generally on the right, although I think there's 1 or 2 that were the other way. Okay, so just make sure you're looking at those and putting cities together that have similar climate graphs. All right, that's part 1, okay, is making up these groups with the climate graphs. Right. Part 2, okay, is that you're not going to use an atlas. Obviously, you have the Chromebooks in front of you. You can just use Google Earth, okay, something like that, and locate these cities. Okay, what you want to do is write a brief description of the area each city is in. Here's some things that you need to include in that brief description. Latitude, altitude, okay, and then geographic features. Okay, that could be things like mountains, okay, oceans, okay, things like that. Everybody with me there? Okay, and the other things you might want to look at if you're looking at a coastal city, then see if maybe ocean currents might be something that matters there. Okay, stuff like that. All right, so those are the things that you would want to include in your brief description. Obviously, if something is right on the coast, its altitude is sea level, yeah, 0 meters. Okay, you don't need to bother looking that up, but you may actually have to look these up in, just type it into Google, latitude of Halifax, and it'll spit it right out. Okay, it'll be in degrees north, right? Everyone follow me on that? Okay, and then altitude will be in meters. Okay, and then just look at Google Earth and look at the geographic features and see what you see, okay, in terms of things that might be important as factors that affect climate. So you're going to make notes on that. That's why it's going to be important to be in a group, okay, because you're going to want to split up the cities, okay, because there's a lot of them, right? If we look at this list here, okay, so we've got Vancouver, Medicine Hat, and St. John's, okay, and then we've got Halifax, Charlottetown, Prince Rupert, hey, Toronto, Winnipeg. It just keeps going and going and going. Okay, there's a whole bunch of cities here, so you want to split that up. Okay, I'm going to want to see those brief descriptions. Okay, that's part of what I'm marking here is your brief descriptions. Okay, of each city. All right, so that's basically your data acquisition. Okay, getting what you need in order to do the analysis. So now with your group, you've already kind of put these things in groups with their climatograms, but now what you want to do is now look at the brief descriptions. Are the cities that you put in groups affected by the same things? All right, so if I'm looking at Halifax and St. John's, yes, okay, they are affected by the same things. They're both close to the ocean, they're both at sea level, they have similar latitude, blah, blah, okay? I have all the same kind of factors affecting climate, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to make up these groups, give them a name. So you could call it like the East Coast climate or the maritime climate, or maybe you have one that's, you know, the West Coast climate, or you've got, you know, prairie or whatever. You think up the names, but okay, make it something appropriate. And then you are going to describe the factors that affect climate in that group. So your answer for question number 1 is going to be, here are my groups. Okay, and so for my Atlantic climate group, these are the factors that most affect the climate of this area and how. All right, so you talk about, you know, for my Atlantic climate, it's this factor, it's this factor, it's this factor, probably I'd say minimum 3, okay, factors that affect the climate and how they, and then kind of, when you're talking about how they affect the climate, kind of just describe what that climate is like. Okay, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it wet? Okay, whatever. So that's what you're looking for analysis question number 1. Here's my group, or here are the groups, and each group gets a list of factors affecting and a description of the climate. Okay, you should have a minimum of 5 groups. Okay. And then for question number 2, now that you've built these groups, now it's saying, look up these cities, okay, on Google Earth, and then place them in your groups that you already built. Okay, so you know, the first one would be Dawson, Yukon. Okay, well, that's probably going to go in a group with some other northerly cities, just my guess, but okay, you'd probably look at where it is, and it would be in a similar place and thus have similar factors affecting it to some other cities that you already have. Does that make sense? And that's it. Then you have your conclusion, okay? So based on what you found in here and the groups you made up, are there some factors that generally affect all Canadian cities, and what are they? Okay, that's your conclusion, and then you're done. Making sense? All right, the most time-consuming part of this is getting the brief descriptions done. Okay, finding them in Google Earth, getting the descriptions done, okay? And then you and your group can decide on what the climate groups are going to be. Okay? All right, so you have today's class and Tuesday's class to work on this. All right, if you don't get it done in that time, then you'll have to finish up the rest of it for homework. It'll be due next Friday. All right, Liam, question? Latitude, altitude, and geographic features. So mountains, oceans, big lakes, you know, Great Lakes, something like that. Yeah? All right, so you guys can decide who you want to work with, or like say, if you want to work on your own, you can, but man, it's a lot of work. But that's up to you. Have at her, okay? Don't forget that you have a unit exam on Monday.